Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake, and I am once again joined by my lovely co-host, Christy. Christy, how are you today?
Oh my God, I'm so tired. I think that's going to come through, but I'm well, but I am super tired.
And rightfully so, though, because this is actually Christy's own trip report.
Woot woot.
And to do this trip report, we had to bring in the cavalry. We have Christy's husband, Dave, on with us. Dave, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm not as tired as Christy, but I am doing well.
One of the two is more well-rested, apparently.
The jet lag is killing me. It is absolutely killing me. We had a hard time getting over there and adjusting and coming back. I'm having a hard time. I'm not doing well. I was saying before we recorded, I took a nap and I woke up. So I took a late nap today. I woke up. I did not know which house I was in, which country I was in, where I was, or like what time of day it was. It was one of those like real messed up waking up naps. And that was just an hour and a half ago.
I mean, 6 hours is a big time difference. And Christy does not do well when the time changes by 1 hour in the spring and the fall. So
It's all true. It's very true.
So as you can tell, this was not a weekend getaway on the Wish. And we have talked about this a little bit in upcoming, and you will have probably already listened to the kind of first part of this episode or pre-episode where Christy's going to hit on everything such as her travel to and from Switzerland and then Amsterdam and kind of their embarkation process here. So this is kind of a two-part episode here, and we're really going to pretty much focus on the nitty-gritty of this Adventures by Disney Christmas Market River Cruise. So first off, why did we want to book this cruise, or this adventure, I should say?
I think we were actually en route to Europe when we had the discussion, or we're already in Europe. Like, how did we get here? Why did we book this? Like, this is a conversation Dave and I literally had because I could not remember how we made it to let's pick this trip. And I talked about at the end of 2022 that I qualified for a higher status with Delta. And with that came with vouchers for upgrade certificates that they could be used to Europe or upgrade certificates for like a long haul flight. So we literally just tried to decide where to take a long haul flight. And we looked at Hawaii and would upgrade certificates be available. We looked at a couple of different European locations. And with that, we started looking at Adventures by Disney. And then we were like, you know what? Christmas makes a lot of sense to just go over the Christmas break. I wanted to do Christmas markets because ever since Dave and I went to Paris just after Christmas, so Blake would have been like 18 months old, and everything was so lit beautifully. The Christmas markets were closed down, but everything was twinkly. And I love a good Christmas light and like Christmas scenery and all the things, right? So yeah, somehow we stumbled and picked this. Oh, you know what part of it is too? We looked at a couple of the different land vacations for Adventures by Disney, and they looked even more exhausting than this one looked, which this one was plenty exhausting. So that was one of the reasons, because it was like longer, more involved days. And this had like a little bit of downtime here and there. And
well, I think
so
the other appealing thing was, like you're saying, they sounded exhausting. And I think it was, with the land ones, you have to move hotels
and pack
and repack and all that. Whereas this one, I seem to remember the way you kind of sold it to me was, it's like a cruise. You're going back to the ship every night. So you are moved downriver. You don't have to repack. You don't have to do all that. So it's exhausting, but maybe a little less exhausting than it would have been with a land tour.
Yeah.
Yes. So Adventures by Disney in general is an episode of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. They are going to jump you all over the place, but in return, you will get to see some of the most amazing things and have just these absolutely amazing tour guides. Whereas for the river cruises, Adventures by Disney is partnered with AMA Waterways, And basically, you get on the ship, and that is your floating hotel room. And for the most part, for river cruises, you are basically parking right downtown. Now, we may have some interesting changes to talk about here and some things to look out for, but we will get into that. But continuing on with Ama Waterways and the ship, you guys were on the Ama Lucia.
Yeah, Lucia. Yep.
Lucia. Why don't you tell us about the ship as well as what kind of cabin you booked and how that worked out for you guys?
The ship was interesting because it literally was one lounge, like one restaurant, and your cabins, and like a welcome reception desk. So if you wanted to be social with other people, you did it in this one lounge. And if there was an event going on, that occurred in one lounge. Like Disney cruises, or every cruise line, right, has all these different spaces and nooks and crannies. And we saw Steve and his family earlier today, and we were telling them, like, if you wanted to read your book, but you didn't want to be in your cabin, you were in the one lounge. And whatever was going on in that one lounge, you were also a part of because there was nowhere else to be. She was gorgeous, absolutely beautiful, well-maintained. Just really, the crew were amazing, honestly. So like no issues with any of that.
Yeah, and she was beautifully decorated. I mean, they had done a really good job of decorating for Christmas. They had trees in like every area. Like the lounge had, I think, 3 trees. The entranceway had one giant tree, and then they had, boughs of holly with lights and all that streaming the entire perimeter of the ship. So it was just beautifully decorated for Christmas.
Each cabin had a wreath on it with like even a little like Santa or whatever that was doing something different in each cabin. So you could kind of like identify your cabin by what your Santa was doing. So
and they technically did have, I think, the 2 restaurants, but one was the chef's table.
Oh,
so,
right.
But
and they had a bistro, but the bistro was attached to the lounge.
Yeah.
So and like they had like a buffet table that literally could house like 2 or 3 things total that was at the bistro, or like they had a menu that had like 4 items or 1 item on it or something. And then they had the chef's table in the rear of the ship, which we did see. And I guess this is something we did see somebody working there one day, like had his laptop out. So that was a space you could go and sit, but it's like, a dining room table versus, sitting in a comfy chair.
These river boats are much smaller than Disney Cruise Line. Approximately how many people were on the sailing? And when you were sailing to and from your different locations, did it ever feel crowded, only having that kind of one centralized area?
Not really. I never felt crowded. I know there were 152 passengers, and I remember them saying 50 crew. We didn't see that many crew. I mean, there was obviously the wait staff and the cruise director and the hotel manager and all that, but I think a lot of them we did not see, but it never really felt crowded, I didn't think.
No. The one time you felt maybe the crowds was when we all had to gather in the lounge. All of the seating places, like there would be like a U-shaped couch, but the edges of the U, people had to sit in. You had to use all available space, basically, in order to fit the 152 passengers in that lounge for the times that they wanted all of us to be in the lounge. But it really didn't feel crowded. It didn't feel like there weren't lines for anything. It wasn't anything like that.
In fact, it was funny because I think all of us said there were moments where we were a little surprised because it did feel like there were so few people on, that we were moments of surprise where we'd see somebody and be like, oh, we're on a cruise with you. Like there were some people we just never encountered, never saw. So it really was a case where, you kind of met your own little pod and you didn't really feel super crowded.
And for the record, the Ama Lucia has a max occupancy of 156 passengers. So this was basically a full sailing, and that is over 78 staterooms in total. Which brings me back around to my next question, was what kind of stateroom did you book?
So I don't know what it was called, but basically there were what they would consider a suite. And those, I think there was like maybe 4 on each deck, or two or 4 on each deck of each of the 2 main decks. And those had like a couch and a dividing wall and a bed. And so like a separate sitting area and things like that. And then there were like French balcony cabins that had a sliding glass door that would slide to the outside, but no like physical balcony you could stay on. And those typically still had 2 chairs, I believe, and either 2 twin beds or 1 queen. They had then a room with a triple bed. So it was like a couch chair, and this chair could fold out into a bed. And that's something unique to some of these newer river cruise ships or they're called longboats as well. Because interestingly enough, there are no lifeboats on board the Amaluchias. So, in these riverboats. But they were still a ship because of their size or their tonnage or something like that. There are no lifeboats, which typically the sign of a ship is that there's a boat within the ship. But this one, there weren't. And they were basically like, you grab your life jacket and you're not far from the shore, so you swim. We're like, oh, okay, if something were to happen. And you really weren't far from any shore ever. I guess I could see that. But anyway, fun, random side fact. So there were these triples, but the triples were all sold out by the time we booked. When we booked, we could have booked one of the suites, but 2 cabins was cheaper than a suite. We ended up with 2 cabins. Ours did have a little balcony, and the French, it has both a regular sitting balcony and a French balcony. So you could have like a big wall of open window if you were not cruising in the middle of winter. So we had those. They were across the hall from each other, and we slept with Dave in one cabin and Blake and I in the other, and that worked out beautifully.
So in total on this ship, there are only 5 different classes of rooms. Basically, as Christy mentioned, there's 1 suite. There is 1 category that sleeps up to 3. And then the other 3 categories are all variations of your standard 2-guest occupancy room.
Yeah, and there's a couple on the lower level that just have like a window that looks, so it's like a garden view type room situation where the window's a little bit higher, and those are off to the side. So yeah, that's the other category type that I haven't really talked about.
And some things that I feel I need to share, because I seem to remember we struggled to find this information when we were planning the trip, is, so for Christy and Blake's room, they can separate the beds into 2 twin beds, so that if you are traveling with somebody but don't want to share a queen size or king size bed, they split them apart. If you are, traveling together with your partner, they can put them back together into a king size bed with a single cushion and all that. And they just move the end tables around to make it work. The plugs are all American style. So you're able to plug your American plugs right into them. You don't need an adapter. We'd brought one anyway, which was very useful for the hotels before and after and all that. But you can do that. And they also had a lot of USB outlets. So you're able to find charging at your end table, but also across the room under the TV and all that. So I wanted to share that because I know when we were looking, we had a really hard time finding that information.
All right.
Leave it to the tech guy to tell us about the plugs, but that was important.
Important information. And the standardization of USB-C or USBs makes travel a lot easier when most rooms anywhere now have USBs, or we would hope. Yeah. But why don't we go ahead and jump into it? So we embark on Basel, Switzerland. What events do they have waiting for you on the ship when you embark?
So when you first get out, there's basically nothing except they have tea time, and you could eat a lunch if you were on in such a time. I believe our ship arrived at 3:00, basically to the port. I still can't remember what exactly was happening. They had to move the parking spot, or they moved down the river or something like that. But either way, they arrived at 3:00, and we just were in the city already, which we talked about, and just basically walked to the dock and got on the boat. And there were pieces of luggage. Oh, because from the hotel, your luggage would be transferred. So some of the luggage was already sitting there, like with a crew guy just waiting to get on board. And then the rest of it was coming from the second or whatever, the next transfer over. Our luggage came to our room very quickly. I know we unpacked. I had a picture that I found of Blake in his PJs on his bed at like 4:30, just having a moment of like sitting on the bed. And then they did like a welcome aboard cocktail, and like the captain talked to us and the adventure guides came out and introduced themselves. So it was like almost every day at 6, there was a meeting that sort of occurred in the lounge where everybody gathered in the lounge. And some of the times it was a mandatory meeting, and some of the time it was just to hear about your next day. And the dinner was always served whenever that meeting was over, but always at 7 or after. That was a hard thing for us to all sort of get comfortable with, was the late dining situations that occurred. Yeah. And one other note about food is there was not a snack to be had on the ship. There was not a pretzel. There was not a popcorn. There was not a snack to be had. And so if I was packing for this trip again, and especially with my family, we would bring more snacks. So we would bring some like bags of pretzels or prepackaged popcorn or things like that, so that we could just like have a little snack. There was a tea time every day, but the tea time included cookies and an apple.
Yep.
Like a whole
and
apple.
Some fruitcake too every now and then too. They had
I mean, the cookies, I'm just going to go with cookies / cake, dessert, whatever it was. There wasn't a sandwich to be had in that tea time.
Yeah. It was a very sweets oriented type of tea time.
So, but they did that like welcome event where you met your adventure guides. From there, we actually met Blake. We met a couple. Blake referred to them as the Goodfellows. And so we literally referred to them as the Goodfellows for the whole rest of the trip. Like we still call them the Goodfellows now. They love their name, so they're perfectly good with that name. And because we sat at their couch because you had to share space. There really wasn't a way that you could be like, I want my own space. It just, there would have been enough room in the dining room to have your own table for the most part. There wasn't in the lounge enough space for people to not share. So we met the Goodfellows. The Goodfellows actually joined us for dinner that first day, and then they joined us for the whole rest of the trip for our meals. So that was really nice.
They also did the safety briefing. You know, the captain came out, he introduced himself. They introduced all the normal crew, like the director, the cruise director, the restaurant manager, all the normal people. They talked about the safety briefing. So they went through the typical things about life jackets and things of that nature. There apparently is a safety video on the ship that you can watch on your TV. And so they recommend that. I think the only ones that watched that was the Goodfellows. So they watched it for our group. So,
and they would randomly like share things throughout the week. Oh, this was in the safety video. Yeah. And like their cabin had the safety video on it and going. And I think that was part of it. Our cabin, my TV was like not on during the beginning of the trip. So we didn't have the safety video going, whatever.
Like, I know we had the option for it, but we didn't. None of us actually watched it. And the captain was really, really good. I think we lucked out that we had this very well-known, respected, experienced captain on the river, Captain Hank. He told us that night that he was born on a cruise ship or on a ship. So he was born and raised on the river ships.
On the seas.
On the seas.
Which comes into play later in the ship. Not the fact that he's born on a ship, but the fact that he was well respected comes into play later in our trip.
During this like welcome reception, was this your first interaction with your adventure guides as well?
Yes. And we had 5 total. There were 3 from the States and then 3 from... Two. Yeah, sorry, because math is hard. Yep. 2 from France.
Yep.
After we settle down for the night, you wake up the next day in Strasbourg, France.
Yeah, that's where we were supposed to wake up. But this was the start of
slight changes.
The river was very high and changes had to be made. So we ended up waking up in, what is the name of it, Dave?
It's like Brossik, Germany.
So everything else about that day was the same, except that we were not in Strasbourg.
Yeah. It actually meant that, as Christy discovered, that we had a shorter commute to our excursion at Europa Park.
We did. I think the other people didn't.
Had to go further. Yeah.
Before we get into Europa Park here, what was the cause of your change of like port?
The high river. So basically with river cruising, 2 things could happen. You could have a low river, which occurs in the summer, where there is not enough water to get you through the different either the locks won't work right, or the river is just literally too low to traverse through, or it's too high. And in our case, the high river comes into play quite a bit during our trip.
Yeah.
Like, we have pictures, which we will post some in the show notes, where the water is like, there's trees and houses and things, and the water is into them. Like, there is serious flooding occurring in Europe right now. And part of it, and in this area, and part of it was because they had we were told they had a big snow, and then a huge snow, unprecedented. And then the snow melted really quickly. All of that water went everywhere. And then it like never stopped raining. Like, it rained almost our entire trip.
Back to Europa Park. Why don't you tell us about how that went?
This place is wild.
Crazy.
So, and on this day, you could go to Colmar or you could go to Europa Park. We already talked about the fact that we went to Colmar privately on our own so that we could go to Europa Park. And because Colmar was only like 45 minutes from Basel. So, and super easy to do. We talk about that in the first episode. But Europa Park is like a ripped off Walt Disney World. Their mascots are even two mice.
Yeah. Ed and Edda.
And so Europa Park, we're not going to give the history of everything, but we find this to be fascinating. Europa Park is voted as like the top amusement park in the world many years running. So over all the Disney parks. And again, who knows who does this voting and who comes up with this, but this is what we're told. And then it was created by the Mack family. The Mack family created rides, like they create roller coaster rides. They also created like the ride vehicle, like the Ratatouille ride. There's something with the technology and the ride vehicle technology that the Mack family actually created. Disney does not hate the Mack family, which is evident
It was
in the
very
fact
surprising
that there was a Spaceship Earth building, like the exact Spaceship Earth. It's smaller, but the exact dome, something different's inside, but the exact Spaceship Earth building. And then there was a Soarin' type ride. And then there was countries that you'd visit in this amusement park. We're like, and then their mascot are mice. And it used to be, apparently, because I Googled it, there used to be other animals that were also mascots, but they appear to not be mascots anymore or something, not sure. But so it's like a ripoff Walt Disney World. And maybe because of the relationship, because they create roller coasters, Disney needs their ride technology and knowledge. Maybe this is assumption on our part, but maybe that's the reason Disney's okay with this ripoff amusement park in Germany, West Germany. We had a lot of rain this day, but it was very cool. And this is where it started to be like the things that you always hear about with Disney, like the front of the line. So there was a whole bunch of people queuing to enter the park. We did not queue up to enter a park. We could just enter it. And they first started with, don't make eye contact with anybody. Don't really look at anybody. All these people are waiting in line to enter and we are just walking past them. So, don't.
No eye contact.
Yeah, no eye contact. They said that several times throughout the trip. They had an ice skating show. Dave likes to call it the Ice Capades. And they got us like special seating for it. So with them came he was like the director of marketing for the park. And he was around our group for much of the day, or around the adventure guides, and then would come together for various things. So they got us special seating for the Ice Capades. It wasn't called that, but whatever they called it, the ice show. This show was wild. Like, so if anybody's listening that goes to Europa Park, you have to go to the show, because it was like, I can't even describe it.
Everything you could possibly imagine, they threw into the show. It was very strange.
It was supposed to be over, and then it wasn't over. I will never look or listen to All I Want for Christmas Is You song again the same, because they incorporated that into it, and it was wild. It was just, I can't explain it, but it was something to see. Like, the show ended 3 times, but never ended. No. Like, it should, like, they were like, yeah, this is great. Yeah. And then it didn't. And then
they kept going.
And then it was like, oh, like, thanks for like this person and this person. And then it didn't end again. And the adventure guides, we were all sitting next to like the park director guy and the adventure guides. And we were just dying because we were just like, it's the never ending ice capades and, you know, the false endings. It was, I don't know. I know you had to be there.
It was apparently the first time that the adventure guys saw it too, and they were just like, "This is crazy." They were equally as awed as we were. Blake loved it. He was enthralled. He loved it.
We went on the Soarin' ride, and it's really interesting because their Soarin' vehicle actually moves from like side to side a little bit. It's the same concept, and in fact, like the same castle view that we have of the like old, you know, that's
the one on the peak. What's up on like the mountainside or whatever that you soar into? Yeah,
that same castle is in our Soarin', is in their Soarin'. It was just like, so that was wild. But you're like they had the smells and the whole thing, but their ride vehicle moved like back and forth. So we didn't make it to many rides because we couldn't
figure out.
There were people that were very experienced that knew what they wanted to do ahead of time and did a ton. We, for whatever reason, were just lost for much of this day. It was fine. It was just raining a lot. We were lost a lot. The food thing ended up not really being an issue because Europa Park has a guide online of the gluten-free food and like literally says, in this country, you can eat this and this country. So like they marked it down, and I knew there was a pizza place that had gluten-free pizza. We went there for the pizza. It was great. Disney gives you, if you're out on an excursion for lunch and you're like over the lunch hour and your excursion doesn't already include like a sit down lunch, Disney gives you money for lunch. So they gave us all a $15 gift card to use in the park and was just like, I mean, you could use it on anything you want, but also use it for lunch. And they're like, I know $15 a person doesn't seem like much, but the adventure guide Byron is like, you will have more than enough money. And he was right. Like we got a snack at one point, got like 4 things, and our money, it was like 10 monies.
He's like, it's not like a Disney where you can have a few things and there's $30 gone. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Like the pizza was like €14 for like a whole giant pizza. So it was just like, there was plenty of money to go around. Disney made it covered. And then the other thing we didn't talk about is they gave us all €10. And I think they did it on the bus on this day. So whatever excursion you had this day, you got this €10. And it was like in an envelope and every person got it. And it was to do a mystery Santa, as Blake would call it, exchange, a mystery gift exchange. So basically they're like, you're going to take your €10 sometime over the next 4 days, you're going to buy a gift for somebody on board. And then on Christmas night, they did a gift exchange. So some people actually started spending their gift exchange money in Europa Park. So that is the point of bringing it up now. But like, that's like the little tiny Disney differences. Like, I don't know that they do a gift exchange, Secret Santa on another river cruise that happens to go over Christmas. But Disney does because, you know, they're Disney.
Yeah. One tip I would give is, because they didn't tell us until the morning of while we were waiting to get on our bus to go, is Europa Park apparently has an app that you can download.
Oh my God.
And so I would say download, if you're going to do Europa Park, download it ahead of time. There's, you know, comparing to Disney, there's good and bad on both sides. Disney is far better with the universal Wi-Fi everywhere. So you can get access to Wi-Fi no matter where you are. You know, we didn't have our cellular turned on, and Europa Park does have Wi-Fi, but it's more of a hotspot thing. So you don't always have access to the Wi-Fi. When you do, however, one of the really nice things in the app that I wish we'd figured out earlier in the day is you can ask it to route your path. So you pick like where you want to go and say, route me, and it will then give you a nice little line path that'll show you exactly how to get to the ride or location or activity you want to get to. So I do recommend downloading that ahead of time if you guys are going.
And we won't go into this much detail for every stop, but I just thought like these things were kind of interesting because it's like a theme park and we're Disney people and all of that.
Was that all we did on the first day then?
Yeah. So then when we got back on board, there was like another meeting, you know, I think this one was at 6:30 where they discussed the things that was going to happen tomorrow. We never got the schedule until either that night or in our cabins. I think it was always at the briefing where that's when we learned what time something had to happen the next day, like what time you had to be up to do your adventure. So like we didn't know it in advance. And now we know that that's because the river's changing and these river boats are so like dependent on when they can get through a lock and when things happen that they don't know the schedule until later in the day. Like it's not something like your Disney cruise, you know what time you're going to get off the ship the first day for every port, but that is not like that on a river cruise because they don't always know how
there
it's
was
going to go.
one or two times where they ended up giving out updated itineraries afterwards.
So that night, they also had the junior adventure dinner, which occurs apparently typically one time during all Adventures by Disney adventures. So either river cruising or land vacations. So they take your kids and then give them dinner and do little activities and games with them. So then the kids all fall in love with the adventure guides, which is good for the parents and the kids. Oh, and then they started the German pickle hunt. And this became a thing throughout the week. And it's like literally this, like the Germans have one of the things they do traditionally is they used to be like a real pickle, but now it's just a plastic or ceramic pickle. You hide a pickle in the tree and like people find it and it's a whole thing. And so they would hide a pickle in the common areas of the ship and all the people would run around and look for it. So that had started occurring. Like it occurred at 9:00. So everything happened so late. Like these days were so long and the kids want to do the pickle hunt because, somebody talks about it. And so it's exciting. And then there was a sip and sail every day also during the cruise. And the sip and sail on this day occurred from 9 to 10. That included like a preset list of drinks that you could have included in your cruise fare. The other time drinks were included were at lunch and dinner. And those drinks were beer and wine and like sodas. And then during sip and sail as well, you could get those items plus some cocktails, like specific list of cocktails and liquor that they provided. Like you can't just have anything you want.
There's usually a drink of the day, both a cocktail and a mocktail drinks of the day. And they would usually tell you on your sheet the night before what the next day's drinks were during the sip and sail. And so those ones are just included. And
then the regular sip and sail drinks that are there every day. Gin and soda or whatever you want. So that was the end of that day. The adventure guides took our kids and that was great.
Very cool. Well, moving into day 2, it looks like we stay in Strasbourg.
Well, we get there because remember, we didn't get to Strasbourg. We were supposed to, but we were in Breisig or whatever, Germany. So we, should have stayed in Strasbourg, but we actually just arrived to Strasbourg.
What did we have planned for this day?
So this day, basically everybody had a walking tour and you picked a time. It was like a group 1 or a group 2. So that all started between 9:30 and 10:30. Strasbourg, you don't stop. The port is not in the city center. So you have to take transportation to get to and from. And then, so the walking tour occurred and then lunch was back on board at 12:30 and they had a bus that would drive you back and forth. They did say that the Christmas markets get really crowded as the day goes on. So we opted to skip the walking tour and go to the Christmas markets during the day. So we took their transportation, walked with them to the city, or I think we only walked partially and then we did the rest by ourselves. And then we just went back to the bus stop to take the bus back to the ship at the end. So we did like shopping on our own in Strasbourg. And then we had lunch and in the afternoon, there was a petite train tour of Strasbourg and that was fine. And it like took you and talked to you about different stuff.
It took you around like and kind of showed you old towns and stuff like that. And then it had one of those headphones where it would tell you different information about that area. So it was a neat little ride. And it was, the one thing was that they were very popular. And so that was another one of the magic of Disney where they kind of got you on the train. And this was definitely people were very, very pushy to try and get on the train. They were
trying to get on the train, but Disney had the whole train. Yep. So they were just like, you have to push past people and get on the train. That was wild. That was like hold your kids tight, wild.
Can we talk about this train just a little bit more? Like, what is the size of this train? Because it's called a petite train.
Le petit train.
And this petite train was in other countries. We saw that train in like
in
Cologne,
Cologne.
Germany. But it was like not a train. It was a cart that had like cabooses or whatever, like little, right?
Little cars.
I feel like,
Little cars.
definitely shorter because it's maybe only about 4 cars long, but it was, think a smaller version of the tram at like the Ticket and Transportation Center,
But
like smaller than that.
You could look at that.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was an experience. It was an experience.
I don't think we had a picture of it because it was just too wild, like getting on, getting off, and the crowds, like literally somebody got like pushed getting off because then the people like wanted to get on to their next train. It was
I mean, before you're getting off, people are trying to push on. You're like, I you want you to have my seat, but you need to let me off first. So, but it was cool. And I think the coolest part about that is it's like known as Christmas capital. So the Christmas markets were around the beautiful cathedral that's there. So you get this whole experience of the Christmas markets with the cathedral in the background. And it's just a very cool place to go and visit.
Strasbourg is the market that's in all of the pictures that you see. Like anytime anybody talks about a Rhine River cruise, it's got like the big Strasbourg lit up sign, which leads us to the rest of our day. No, did we go back?
We stayed. So what we ended up doing, because they had changed it around because of the difference with the ports and everything that was happening with the river, they changed things around where they were going to let us be there at night more because they're like, it's all beautiful and lit up. But there was also an issue where because of the way the transportation worked, there were only so many buses going back to the ship. And so you sort of had to decide what your day is going to look like. And what we opted to do is you were either going to have to stay until after dinner and eat dinner somewhere in the markets and then come back around 8:30 or 9 to the ship, or leave early and maybe miss some of the markets being lit up at night, or find your own way. So what we ended up doing is we did the petite train. After lunch, we got back into Strasbourg, did the petite train, did all that, shopped a little bit and did the markets. And then by that point, it was around 4 o'clock and it gets dark very early there. So we just kind of walked around a little bit until it darkened up enough and found our way to that entry spot where that like Christy was saying, the lights where it lights up saying, Christmas markets or Happy Noel or Joyeux Noël, as it's said in French. And then we sort of made our way. We just found a cab and made our way back to the ship to be able to have dinner on board. Otherwise, you'd have to wait until the bus takes you back at around 8:30 or 9 and figure out dinner in the area.
So before we move on to the next day, obviously, like this is the Christmas markets cruise.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Christmas capital. Strasbourg is Christmas capital, as they kept telling us.
That's what they call themselves.
Right. Which is why I wanted to kind of stop us here for just a second. First off, for those that don't know, what can you find at these Christmas markets? And again, being that it is the Christmas market river cruise, did these kind of like meet your expectations of what you were hoping to get out of them?
Yeah, it was wild. I talk about this in the first episode that the Christmas markets is like throughout a city. And I thought there'd be like one market, but there's actually multiple markets in each of the cities. So that was new to me that we just experienced the first time when we were in Colmar. And at them, they had like different candles and food. There was lots of food and there's like ornaments, and Strasbourg had a bunch of nutcrackers. So stuff like that, like Christmas decorations, Christmas related things, lots of snow globes. Like we bought a snow globe in Strasbourg. Yeah, I would say like Christmas decorations and food.
Yeah. And then there were other random shops too.
Like Basel had a bunch of jewelry. Mm-hmm. And then Cologne had a bunch of jewelry as well. So it was like, and then there would be like a bunch of winter wear as well. Like you could buy your gloves, like handmade or somebody, whatever, right? Mittens, scarves, hats, like a lot of that was sold. Yeah, I think it met it. It was just so many lights. It was so pretty. Oh, and there was always like a carousel, and there was always like a children's market area where there was like a littler kid ride. That was like in every one of the markets too.
Yeah. Like she said,
or every city's market, because again, it's all over like the city, the downtown city. So some of the little places could be like 3 blocks from something else.
Yeah. And the food, it was always a little bit different in every city. The one thing we worried about going in was that you'd see a lot of repeat things. And I feel like we didn't really encounter that, even with the things they were selling whether it was food or trinkets or whatever, it was all a little bit different. And the only commonality, I think, was in the drinks. All of them had some form of hot wine, which Christy tried and
mulled wine.
Didn't really care for, but you tried. Glühwein in German, and it's Vinchaude in France. But it all had this hot wine.
It's mulled wine.
It's mulled wine. But yeah.
And yeah, I was not a fan. They also had hot cocoa. And each of the markets will have like a specialty cup, each of the cities. And you like rent this cup. So you pay a deposit and you either keep it or you turn it back in to get your money back.
So that was a thing. A lot of people were trying to collect all the different mugs from the different markets.
That's a big thing.
But I think it exceeded our expectations. I mean, I think, like I said, we were worried about it repeating, but it didn't. And it was really cool just to kind of walk around, and it was much bigger and more sprawling than we thought. So it was very, very cool experience.
Colmar and Strasbourg were both in France, and I feel like they did have some similar things because they were both in the Alsace, is that how we say it?
Alsace,
region of France. And so because of that, some of their stuff was the same because literally they were both Alsace and, etc. But
all right. Well, very cool. Thank you for elaborating on that. And it does sound just honestly absolutely awesome. But moving along here, day 4 finds us in Mannheim, Germany. What did we do in this port?
This was the start of mandatory meetings. I think this was the start of mandatory meetings, but I think we already had a shift, right? Which we weren't in Strasbourg the day we were already supposed to be there. And this one we had a shift as well. We stayed
in Strasbourg, I think.
In Strasbourg, but
it was Baden-Baden was the next day, wasn't it?
Yes. So this particular day was one where we couldn't get to our dock of wherever we were supposed to go. And I think on this day, I actually asked, what time is stuff occurring tomorrow? And they're like, you have to find out tonight. And it was one of those where it was like, well, okay, just tell us what time it's occurring. Like, what's the big deal? And the big deal was everything was changing because of the river levels. So we actually stayed docked in Strasbourg, and then everybody took their transfers to their places. Like the Heidelberg Castle was like 2.5 hours. That was one of the choices you could do in a bus. And then we went to Baden-Baden for a German Christmas market. How long was ours? It wasn't that.
It was only about 45 minutes at most. Yeah, it was like 35
I think I looked on a map and it was supposed to be an hour. It like said it was an hour and a half, but it wasn't. It was like, like Dave said, 45 minutes. So for us, it worked out just fine. For the Heidelberg people, they had a very long bus ride where lots of people took naps. So we went to this Christmas market. It rained again.
Yep.
But it was
good. Rained. It was probably a heavier rain than we'd had the other days, and it was a little colder. But it was a very cool Christmas market. They had it set up in kind of a loop, and Blake had made friends with this little boy on the Europa Day that was about his age. It was only 6 months older, so they kind of bonded really, really quickly. And they happened to be on that excursion too. So we just kind of walked the market with he and his family and just kind of went shopping a bit, found some food. I found these pastries that were absolutely amazing. I only got one and then I had it and I had to go back in and get like 2 or 3 more.
And the guy even said, you're going to want more than one.
He goes, you're going to want more than one. He goes, I won't be surprised when you come back. Sure enough, came back. So it was really good. It was really good. Blake and I had no real issue finding something to eat. Christie's was a little harder in the markets area to find something that was gluten-free. There were a couple of times where there were shops that actually said gluten-free on them. So we were able to do that there. But for those with kids, no problems at all finding things for kids to eat in the markets.
There's nowhere to sit though.
Right.
So you're like standing at a table. You're just standing the whole time. Like your whole day is standing. Like we actually paid €6 basically for me to have a coffee at this fancy hotel just so we could sit and like have Wi-Fi and coffee and be out of the rain and cold for just a little bit. And then on this day, they gave us €25 a person, which we ended up having extra money for food because we weren't getting back until 2:00. So like people could eat lunch in the tour. The Heidelberg Castle people returned in time for lunch. So they didn't have a place to buy food and they didn't get any food. What else about Baden-Baden? Oh, this is the day we tried looking through the city, but this was Christmas Eve. Baden-Baden, the city is wild. Like the townspeople all were out. So like nobody's working. Most of the places were closed. There was like a coffee shop we ended up going to, or like a breakfast place that we were going to see if we could get food at. And they were like, we're closed. It's Christmas. We're going home to our families. Like, this is literally what the guy said. So like
Europe takes it seriously.
The bars were open and everybody was mingling, like jammed people to people, everybody just having a fun time, like talking and socializing. And that Baden-Baden market, it was like all locals and then us and like people who traveled there or something. It was unexpected and actually very cool.
Yep.
To just see all the locals out and about. So we were back on board. We had lunch. This is like one of our big mandatory meetings. And we actually were a bit concerned that we were going to have to change ships because that was some of the rumors. And we weren't getting any information also about what was going to be happening the next night. We were just sort of waiting to hear. And I think this was the night that mandatory meeting occurred.
Yeah,
because
this was everyone has to be there. The day before there was a mandatory meeting, but only you went. And that's when they were like, well, we're going to stay in Strasbourg. We don't know what's happening. They were giving warning signs that there might be issues. And then the Baden-Baden night is when they're like, okay, this is another mandatory meeting. And all of us went. And this is when they basically shared, because as Christy said, we were worried, do we have to change ships? Do we not have to?
And the captain comes out again.
Yeah, the captain comes out again.
You see the captain.
And it was basically that there was a window opportunity that I think they'd even shared this the night before with you, that there was a possibility, there was a window of opportunity for a certain number of ships to get slotted into going through the locks before they closed them down due to the rivers being too high. And this is, as Chrissy said earlier, where our experienced captain comes into play because
and
he
Disney,
was,
I think, too.
Yes, it was the combination of Disney and the fact that our captain was super well respected. They were able to get one of those slots, which meant that we didn't have to change ships and we were able to get through the locks. They said the bad news was that the next day on Christmas Day, we were supposed to dock in Rudesheim and we were not able to do that. So we were going to have to cruise through the gorge. The good news of that is that in the gorge, there's all these castles to see. There's like 30 castles or something like that you can see from the gorge. And if we had done the normal plan, we would have been cruising through there at night. So we wouldn't be able to see any of them. So this way we were able to see during the day, kind of enjoy. And it was Christmas Day where we didn't have to go anywhere. We got to have a lazy morning and kind of just hang out. And they did all these activities on the boat and got to see the gorge. It actually ended up being probably one of our favorite days.
Yeah. So some people complained, like one would, right? Like some people would, just to complain. Oh, we didn't get to stop. Oh, we didn't get to do what we were supposed. Like, what was the choice? And did they really want to pack up all their luggage and change ships? Because that's what would have had to happen for us to have gotten to Rudesheim. We would have had to pack, move out of our ship, and go to a different ship.
Yeah.
And
I think the good thing here is it kind of showed when you're with Adventures by Disney, especially, they did everything they could to try and make it still entertaining, engaging, and fun. They had all these activities. I feel like they always have these contingency plans of, if we can't do X, then we're going to bring out the bag of tricks and get everyone having a good time still. So it ended up being a really good experience.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a second. But really quick, before we move on from this night, this was the night too that we had like dress in your Christmas pajamas and ugly Christmas sweaters and things like that. And they did like a contest to see like who was the best dressed. Oh, and there was trivia.
Yes, which we won.
And our team, no thanks to me, but won trivia.
That's right.
And we got a very cool pin. That was exciting. And our team, so we sort of talked about the Goodfellows, our friends that we met, our friends, right? Quote unquote, that we met the first night. But then as the cruise went on, we then joined with a mother and a daughter. She's 17, so, an older daughter. And then there was another couple that joined us as well. And so we just were a party of 9 from like maybe the third day, probably.
Third day.
All of our meals we ate together, basically. Like, I think it started where we would sort of eat just dinner together, and sometimes lunch people would be on their own. And then we just eventually, all of the time, we ate our lunches and dinners together as this party of 9 and just stuck together. So we did trivia together as a party of 9. And then other activities, like when we played bingo the next day, we did that as a party of 9. So we had this like our little pod, and we would do all of the things together.
Yeah. And we always had somebody in the pod, was like all of the excursions that were happening, somebody in our pod was going on at least one of them. So that way we were able to have those different experiences shared at dinner where, we could say, oh, what was Heidelberg like and all that stuff. So it was very cool because we got to hear what happened on the other excursions.
So on Christmas, we were supposed to go to Rudesheim and we didn't. So and Rudesheim has this like famous coffee, hot chocolate something. And so, well, it's coffee. And Disney would have given you like a coupon to go in Rudesheim to a place and get this coffee in the wild, in the town. But they brought it on for us. So they made the coffee, and then they had the narration of the Rhine Gorge up on the deck. And this day ended up being great. Like it was a little bit breezy in parts, but then once you were in the gorge, like the wind kind of died down. The sun actually came out at one point. Like it wasn't raining. So it was a really nice, like for us, sailing down the gorge and just spending this day on board was like sort of the break and the thing we all needed. Because these days were long. There was almost always something that occurred still at 9:00 at night. And like Blake would want to go, or, we would want so it was just a long day every day. There was very little downtime. It became a joke that I never washed my hair. Like I did it right in the beginning. And then there was no time to wash my hair because they just kept having activities and stuff we had to do. And then it would be like 10:00 at night and I would be tired, or 10:30 when we were done. And there wasn't time for washing hair at 10:30. And then we'd have to get up early in the morning and go. So I would take a shower in the morning, but I was like, I'm not going out for an entire day with wet hair. So in the cold rain as it was. So there you go. That's my story. But they also they had Bavarian lunch where they had like the beer and the pretzels and sausages. That was with the gross white.
Yeah, the white sausage. Which did not look good.
And people
people said they said it was okay.
The Goodfellows, the one who tried it, he was like, this texture is weird. And to this point, let's talk about food really quick. There was always, I think the difference too between doing Adventures by Disney versus a regular Amiship is there was always like kids options on the menu. And so Blake could eat spaghetti every day for the entire week. Like he ate it for lunch and dinner. And it got to the point where he and then the 17-year-old and the one husband of the other couple, like they often ordered very similar things off of the kids' menus. And then they almost ordered the same thing every night. And so they didn't even give their order to the waiter. Like Blake, he stopped asking Blake what he wanted because he literally ordered the same exact thing for lunch and dinner for the entirety of the cruise. Like the noodle changed sometimes, but it was the same, spaghetti with sauce. So like people talked about there not being kid options, but there really were, like, as long as your kid ate, they always had chicken. They always had like a steak. They did spaghetti or pasta for for everybody on the ship every day. And then they always did like grilled chicken and a burger. So there were these options that you could get as a pickier eater. And people did order them often. And then this day we also had bingo. Bingo didn't cost money and there were prizes. They had a bunch of prizes that they gave out and they did a bunch of different games. So we all played bingo. We had Christmas dinner. We had our mandatory meeting to tell us about, not mandatory, but just our meeting to tell us about the next day. And then dinner, always dinner late in the day. And then the Secret Santa occurred after 9:00. Like I swear though, the Santa part didn't even occur till 10:00.
Well, I think the Santa, they brought Santa out. So the captain Hank dressed up as Santa and they brought him out at around 9 during the sip and sail. And then so everyone got to go up and at first we thought it's just kids could go up, see Santa and all that. But then they're like, no, everyone, everybody
has to go because everybody has to get this bear.
Yeah. So they had little bears and snowmen wrapped in gifts. They're little things. So you go up, you see Santa. So everyone did that. And then we kept thinking, well, I mean, it's almost 10 o'clock now and they haven't done the whole gift exchange. And then they said, okay, time for the gift exchange. And they basically lined everyone up in a giant circle around the whole lounge. And then they decided to, this seemed to be the running theme with 5 adventure guides. Each one then had a turn where they picked a song and they would pick a word in that song that when that word was heard, you transferred your package to the right. It was a bit of a cluster because one person decided to go to the right. The next person said, oh, let's go to the left. And we're all
When
thinking,
your gift basically came back to you.
yeah, you're like, well, I just got my gift back again. So then they realized and said, okay, let's just keep going to the right.
The point was, it was not very well organized.
Yes.
People could not hear. People didn't always know what the word was. Some of the songs were not anything that you had to be like 20 to know what the song was.
And it was 10 o'clock at night and it was late. We were tired.
And it took forever. So this was one of the things that I think Disney didn't do well, was how late it was. There was this family and she's like, I got to get my kid to bed now. Like, I can't do this gift exchange. I have to go now to take my kid. And so we just changed with her. And so I didn't pass gifts, but I actually helped them with some. It doesn't matter, but they have to consider that not everybody's kids need to stay up till 10:30. And there were like 30 kids on board, and there were enough littler kids that they needed to consider them maybe with the scheduling a little bit.
Yeah.
More.
And especially because our next day's tour started at 8:15. It's like, okay, now, and people got to sleep in that morning. It was like, all right, now we need to maybe let them go to bed.
Yeah. Like it all ended at like 10:30 or 10:45. And we had 8:15 to be up, like out and ready to leave to go on a tour. Where were we supposed to dock? Late.
So you were supposed to be in Cologne, Germany the next day.
Okay.
Is this where we ended up?
Well, we went to Cologne, but we had to dock in Dusseldorf, which was like 45 minutes, I believe, from there.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the ship could not go to Cologne. Oh, it's because it was overflowing. So one of the things the captain said, and we have a video of the river going over the wall and into the street. So that's how high the river was. The captain, I guess one of the port days, like some of the people who dock the ship, I don't know who they are, but sailors had to go into the water to moor and tie up the ship. And so he's like, I can't keep putting this water is cold. Like I can't keep putting my crew into the water to dock the ship. And it's just not safe to do that. So we docked in Dusseldorf. And then on this day, they had multiple tours. You could do a chocolate museum. They had I think everybody did a walking tour of Cologne. And that was actually really good. Like really good.
All the local tour guides were really good, I felt, on our trip. Because we always got paired with like a local guide to do stuff like that. And it was really good.
They made it interesting for the children and for the ones like me that just don't want a detailed history of everything. So they did a really good job of that. I was super impressed.
Yeah,
so
because you never liked the history, and this they gave little tidbits that you really enjoyed. It was very entertaining.
Mm-hmm. So there was the walking tour, and then there was a pub crawl,
chocolate factory, the chocolate making, and then
Christmas markets and ice skating.
And we had the Christmas markets and ice skating. And so the other Disney difference thing is like, for you had to put your stuff in a locker when you went ice skating, and they gave you the coin to put in the locker. And then there was like a queued up line of people waiting to get in, and they actually had us go in first and get our shoes first before everything else sort of opened up. So it's like Disney really did do the things like that as many times as they could to like, you skipped the lines, just like you've always heard them like talk about doing on these ABD tours. So that was another really good day.
And then they had cookie decorating in the afternoon that Blake and I did. So they brought on some big gingerbread cookies, and you could decorate them however you wanted. So a lot of it was the adventure guys gave sort of, each one picked a Christmas tradition they do, and you would do that on the trip. So one of the adventure guys, like, I remember always, decorating cookies with my family. And so that's why they did that on that day, to allow for them to share their Christmas traditions with everybody.
Yeah, the schedule says there was a dance class, but I don't know that ever occurred.
Yeah. And they did have on the ship, they had a yoga and like fitness person And I know that one of the people in our pod, she did join him for a couple of times of stretches and yoga in the morning. Yeah. I feel like that petered out as the trip went on though.
Because it was so tiring because everything was so late, like, and then so early. So yeah, people were tired.
All right. And then our last full day brings us to our last stop, Amsterdam in the Netherlands. What did you do for this day?
We actually made it and docked where we were supposed to. So that was, a thumbs up. Everybody did a canal tour in the morning. And, something to note about this trip, there's a lot of walking. And if you have mobility issues, it's just really something to consider because like to get to even the canal tour from where the dock was, it was like a 15-minute walk, just something to keep in mind.
And the roads aren't I mean, a lot of them they're very well kept up, but there's a lot of cobblestones and stuff like that. So yeah, there were a couple of people I saw that did have mobility issues on our trip, and the guides worked with them to try and figure out, well, what can you do? And here's how we can help you. But it is definitely something to keep in mind.
And then there was always like a guide. If it was a longer walk like that, there'd be a guide in the front and a guide in the back so that the people that maybe needed a little bit more time were still brought to the rest of the group whenever they got there. So we all did a canal tour and they divided us up into different boats depending on what our next option was. And the next option was you could go to the Van Gogh Museum or the Rembrandt Museum.
Or the Reich Museum.
Yeah. And so we picked Rembrandt, which was like his house, this artist's house. And then they did the tour like within the house. And that was pretty interesting, actually. Yeah. Blake really enjoyed it. He was like asking questions and listening, and that was good. And then this was a long day. And we got back to the ship and had like just enough time to eat. And then we left, and we can't say it the right way, but the way it looks on the page is we went to Zanschans, which is where they have cheese and clogs and windmills. And this day there was 2 tours. It was either Zanschans in the afternoon or Volendam Fishing Village. And we know like the Goodfellows tried to move themselves from the Volendam Fishing Village from like the beginning, like when you could first register for your events. And then even on board, they tried to move to Zanschans and that one never opened. Like it was always sold out for them and they never had an opportunity to move in. So definitely want to think about that when you're making your excursions, that not all of them can just be intertwined between who could just go. Because things like that have buses, they needed enough seats.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of the confusion was the fact that it originally they made it sound like it was 3 separate tours. There was like the Cheese Museum, the windmills, and the fishing village. But then you find out that the Cheese Museum and the clogs and the windmill was all one place. So it's like it was just really 2 tours.
For people in Michigan, which I know there's not many, but this place was like Greenfield Village. It was like a little old timey. They have the windmill that you can go up in, and they had the cloud decorating. That was super fun. It was super fun afternoon.
I would the way I described it to Steve was a miniature version of like colonial Williamsburg, where it's like it's stuck in the 18th century and that kind of thing.
So when you look this up online under the Amsterdam day, this is actually the only day that has a little asterisk that says note that some of these activities have limited capacity and are first come first serve, and it's right under the Zanschans activity.
Yeah.
And I think because of the clog decorating, because of the windmills, and you're in the Netherlands, and it's like, oh, I want to be near the windmills. It's probably why it is the more popular one. You compare that with Fishing Village, and it's like, I think most people are not picking the Fishing Village.
The Goodfellows enjoyed the Fishing Village.
Yeah, they said it was very, very fun.
And then it was our last sort of dinners on board. The ship had done like a goodbye, a farewell to everybody. Because in Amsterdam, you were docking overnight. They had thought some people, and it was true, I guess, wouldn't be going to dinner and wouldn't be like they could go into Amsterdam to eat dinner. And so they did like a whole ship's goodbye the day before where they had everybody come out and the different lots of talking again. There's always like the big production before you could eat dinner. This particular night, there wasn't as much fanfare. You still had your sip and sail. You still had like sort of the last meeting with the guides. We did get our pictures, or they did the picture slideshow this day. They do for all the tours. And then that was kind of it. Like dinner took very long on this last day. And I know that we didn't start packing until like 9:00.
Yeah.
Or 9:30. And we're like, we have to leave the country. So.
And then you would, the goal was because that you get your luggage out the next morning. They give you certain time slots and you have to get your luggage tags and figure out when your transfers are. So it was just really just wrapping up, packing whatever we could pack up so that we didn't have to do that much in the morning.
I believe you guys hit kind of your disembarkation and post-cruise travel in your addendum episode. That's what I'll refer to it as here.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then kind of wrapping this up, I have just a couple quick rapid fire questions and then one that you may want to get a little bit more detailed in. But my first one here is, of all of these days, which was the best day or excursion?
I almost think Christmas Day was the best day.
Yeah.
Overall, just like being on board and like, you know, our same little pod, like our group of friends that we all like watched the castle stuff together and then the activities that they provided. I think overall that was my favorite day.
I think my favorite excursion was the ice skating in Cologne. So I think, yeah, the favorite day would be Christmas Day and favorite excursion would be the ice skating in Cologne. That was really cool and fun.
Which was wild, though. This would not happen in the States. Like there would just be like divots and dips. Like you could like break your back. Like I pulled my butt muscle at one point because there was like a divot that, because they, you know, made this ice in at different levels or whatever. And sometimes they would mark it, but it was like sketch ice, like super sketchy, but it was so fun. And all these like people were like falling all over and trying to skate. And so
you were constantly reminded that you were not in the States in a lot of these excursions.
Yeah, just like lack of railings into the cities. So just a whole bunch of things that the lawyers would really not allow in the States. You know, there's, I guess, a lot more personal responsibility in Europe than we have because there's a lot of opportunities to injure yourself there that I feel like we don't have as much.
So being a Christmas markets cruise, I'm going to guess that there was some souvenirs brought home. Tell me about your favorite souvenir.
I think my favorite as of now is this snow globe. Like, I don't think I've ever bought a real snow globe for myself ever before, but it's got like, and it's of the Alsace region or whatever. And it's got all just a little bit of splatterings of all the different things that was sort of representative of what we saw at the Christmas markets. So I think that's my favorite souvenir.
For me, I think it's funny because it's more about the experience I had getting it, which is I got a new belt.
Oh, yeah.
Because my belt was very cracked and I'd been meaning to get a new belt. And we were wandering through, then there was a market where they were selling these, it was leather goods and there was belts. And we're like, oh, Chrissy's like, why don't you get a new belt?
And it
I'm
was
like,
a good price.
Yeah, it was a great price. And so like, okay, let's get that. But there weren't any holes in it. So he goes, oh, no, we'll cut it to size and we'll mark the holes for you right here and right now. Is okay. So Christy kind of measured out around my waist and figured out where we wanted it cut down. And he then just trimmed it down, got it to a point, poked holes in it, and then goes, there you go. So that just the experience of that, having that happen in the market, I think was very cool.
It's like a high key flex.
Yeah, exactly.
This is my artesian
leather belt.
Custom cut holes. No, that is really cool though.
Yeah.
What about your sons? Do you know?
Nutcrackers.
Oh yeah. He was so in love with Nutcracker purchases.
But the mouth has to move. He always looked for that little stick on the back that you could move to make the mouth go up and down. They had to have that. And he was obsessed with finding some Nutcrackers.
His favorite excursion was Cologne.
Yes.
Ice skating day as well.
Which was funny because he fell on his butt and didn't want to do it more than like twice. So, but he loved it. He loved every second of it.
I have one last question. Then we do have a couple questions from some listeners about this cruise. But mine is actually not a question. Could you tell us about like any notable or favorite interactions from your guides? One
is that, well, Byron was the favorite of everybody. And when we would post pictures of like the adventure guides, other random people were like, oh, we had a trip with Byron. Byron's amazing. Like Byron is literally everybody that I've talked to's favorite guide. So I think just almost all interactions with him, he was so good with the kids and the adults alike. And he was like the head guide. And then he told some really awesome stories. And actually, one of them, for one of the days right in the beginning, I recorded, and it's going to be a Patreon exclusive recording. I think that he was my favorite guide. I think he was all of our favorite guides.
Yeah.
And then just the different sort of talkings with him, he was very engaging.
Very knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable.
They all had different personalities. He was all energy, all personality. I mean, he was, I don't know how he did it, but he was go, go, go. They all kind of had different strengths. Jana had a fun song that Christy recorded that stuck in our heads. That was a fun little thing. And they all had different experiences that was fun to hit on for different reasons. Like Byron was a wealth of knowledge just with Disney, the parks and everything. One of the things that we engaged with was Clement, who was one of the French guides. We rode back with him one day and we're asking him a little bit about like a Disneyland Paris, because he works out of Disneyland Paris, and just kind of things like, what is a good time of year to go when it's good weather but lower crowds. And so he kind of gave some tidbits there. It just, all of the guides had something different to bring that you could kind of engage with, and they were all of them to some degree or another really, really good with the kids. Blake loved them all. Byron was his favorite. And what was even more fun was the 3 American guides ended up on the same flight we had coming back. And knowing that we were with them for an entire week and they are now in theory done working, it's time for them to start relaxing. He still was very engaging. Like, we talked in line, we were waiting for the luggage together and he was engaging with us. So he just was very welcome no matter what you were doing. He was just very open to, I like people and I want to make sure you have a great experience.
All right. Very cool. I have just a couple questions from some listeners then. First one is, I'd love to know what age you would recommend for a child going on this cruise.
I think it's more of a what level, maturity level. So Blake is 10 and a half, and he really was, and you could go older, of course, but he was like the perfect kid, maturity and age-wise. They are long, long days. So there was a little girl that was maybe 5 on the cruise. I think minimum age is 4, but there was a little girl that was like, I think 5-ish. And she was fine. She did fine during the trip, but it was just like, it's nonstop. It's a big time change. So I would say, what maturity level are your kids for whether they can do these long tours and tons of walking? Like, so they also have to be able to handle that.
Yeah. And I think I'm remembering back to, in 2022, when Blake was 9, we went to Greece, but it was on a cruise. So it was on a Disney cruise. And it was a little bit different in that still a lot of walking, still a lot of that, but it was also not an ABD. So we got to choose whether we were getting off the ship or not. And we got to, there were also some built-in sea days. So there was some downtime, lots more rest time and lots more alone time and things that we could do at our own pace. And he was on the verge of that at 9 years old, where he it was the limit of what he could do at that time. And I think if we had tried to do this river cruise then, he would have struggled with it. But like Christy's saying, being at 10 and a half, being at that maturity level, it was like the perfect age to start.
All right, awesome. And then these last 2 questions I can combine into one. What were your thoughts on the overall quality of the food available on the ship compared to DCL, as well as their ability to manage food allergies?
Yeah, it was really good. It was different than DCL with the food allergies because you didn't pre-order any of your food, but it was also a scratch kitchen, I believe. So they were making everything. Like, they didn't even know what their menu was going to be days in advance. It was like, what did they get or what did they have? And you could tell they like used different components of meals the one day and then the next. I thought the food was better than DCL, not as wide of a choice of a menu. I think there was like 1 or 2 times we were like, but then the food, like even once you ordered it, it really did come out well. Like it was good.
Mhm.
So, and it was fresh. And I think because of that, they can handle multiple food allergies very well because they're literally making all the things right then.
Yep, I
So
agree.
it's not like it's a much smaller capacity. And so they're aware of what's in their food.
Yeah, and as a picky eater, the range of things that I might have available wasn't huge, but there was always something pretty much on every menu that I could eat, and everything I did eat was very good quality. It was very, very good meals.
Different, like the ranch dressing was super different. Like
Yeah,
real different.
Blake
Like
loves ranch dressing, but after the first night, he did not want it anymore because it's just slightly different. And the Caesar dressing was a little bit different, but it was all just very, very good, just slightly different than what we're used to.
mhm.
All right. And then one more question to kind of wrap us up here. And this is kind of the big one. So, as we talked about earlier, Adventures by Disney basically charters some of these AMA Waterway ships to do these Adventure by Disney river sailings. You could book your own AMA Waterways sailing, or you could book a myriad of other cruise lines that do river cruises as well. And many of them do also offer Christmas market sailings just like this. So what do you think that Disney difference is that would make you lean towards doing the Adventures by Disney opposed to just booking, an AMA Waterways on its own?
I think part of it is the kid element. So on AMA, there's going to be children and other cruise lines, river cruise lines. There's going to be children over holidays, major holidays. That's just traditionally always how it is with all these different companies. But with Disney, they pick the excursions differently. Like if you went to the regular AMA website, they have different stops and different excursions than the Disney options. And that's because they want it to be sort of geared towards the masses, but the masses that include children, but of the city. And so I really think that they picked their local guides and their excursions with honestly, families in mind. And I think that's the difference. So I was just talking to friend of the show, Joe from Disney Deciphered, and he was like, I could book for next year this AMA river cruise, or I could do just on AMA through AMA, or I could do your Disney river cruise. And he's like, should I? Like the Disney one costs more. And I'm like, well, look at the excursions, because do the regular AMA excursions look like something you would want to do? Or does the Disney ABD excursions look closer to what you guys would want? Because he is a family of kids, 3 kids. And so it's just definitely something to consider.
And I think for me, the way some of it's my own theory, but I think one of the things two things that struck me that Disney's very good at. Number one, and we've kind of mentioned this a couple times already, they are able to do those relationships that get us in. So we've got like the fast pass to all the things. I question whether AMA by itself would have had equal.
Skips the line.
Exactly. Like when we went to Rembrandt's museum, there was a art historian who guided us through the thing that Byron knew, and he'd worked with her in the past, and she got us right in. And so there's a lot of that can happen. I think that Disney does better. I also think the other side of it is Disney is a master at people management, at corralling people, at making sure they're going. One of the things they did these color coded things. And I know everyone has like the sign that the guide wears as or holds up while they're walking the tours. But what Disney did, which was smart, was they gave you color coded cards in the morning. And those colors were throughout. So for example, you got a color coded card that was purple. The guide would be holding a purple paddle. On the bus is a purple sign in the window. So you knew exactly who to follow, exactly which bus to get back on. So they were corralling people in a smart way that kept the masses going forward. And I think that's one of the things that Disney's really, really good at. And I'm guessing that AMA would still have something in place, but wouldn't necessarily be as organized as what Disney did.
And we had a lot of changes on our cruise. Like when we were supposed to dock in Cologne, there was actually a fear that the Cologne activities wouldn't happen, but Disney made sure that, they worked that we could still go there, and that, yes, we had to go to Dusseldorf and then take a bus in, but that these options still all existed and that we didn't have to change boats. And when we got off in Dusseldorf to get on our bus to go to Cologne, the people with us the people at that port were changing ships. So they all had their luggage, and we just thought maybe it was crew like disembarking or something. No, it was all the people leaving at 8:00 in the morning or whatever to go to their bus to get to their next river ship. I think that, to me, was the Disney difference. They were going to do everything they could. They had, between our captain and Amma in Disney's name, they had priority over the locks where they could get, because, oh my God, we didn't talk about this. You went through so many locks on this cruise, and you could like literally touch the wall on the locks. You were like right there. It was wild.
One of
it
our
was
pod,
so cool.
One of our pod did actually touch on. They kept saying don't do that, but she's like, I reached out, I touched it. It was a very muddy wall.
You're moving in and out of the water. So, oh God, so many locks. If that's your thing, you will love that part too.
All right. Well, do we have anything else to add here before we wrap this up?
The only other thing I would add is I did on Instagram a story highlight, and I answered a bunch of questions, and I put everything related that I posted in that story highlight. So I would say if you are interested in more information, and I did more answering of questions and comparisons and things like that and opinions in those stories. So I would just say, if you're interested in that at all, go to those story highlights. It's in my personal Pack Your Pixie Dust Instagram page, and read through it all, and you can see more pictures and what we did and things like that.
All right. Dave, anything else you'd like to add?
I think just, somebody who'd never done a river cruise before, and also sometimes gets a little overwhelmed by just, if you're go and no downtime, I would say don't hesitate. This was exceeded our expectations.
All of us.
I think all three of us loved every minute of it. Exhausted, absolutely. But at the same time, would not have traded this experience for anything. And I think we are all thinking of like the next one in the future. So if you're on the fence about it, I would say just do it, because it was an amazing experience.
All right. Well, that sounds like a great place to take us out here. Christy, Dave, thank you both so much for coming on and sharing what sounds like just an absolutely magical Adventures by Disney Christmas market cruise. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show. Once again, we want to thank Christy and Dave for coming on and sharing their experience on the Adventures by Disney Christmas Market Cruise. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We would also like to thank our Patreons who make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show and join our community by visiting patreon.com/DCL podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Nova, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL podcast.
The DCL podcast is unaffiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.